All right, welcome to the conversation. Now, look, a lot of folks that are juniors have made a great name for themselves. Martin Luther King Jr., for example. Others are mainly known as their dad's son. For example, Donald Trump Jr., just a sad little boy bankrolling off of his dad, it would appear. But is that really how Don Jr. rolls? Well, we're gonna find out because someone wrote a story about that for the New Republicans. Joe Rubin, he's an Emmy award-winning investigative journalist, so this is good stuff. And it's actually a story I had not seen before, and I find it really interesting. So, Joe, welcome.
Hey, Jane, great to be here. Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
No problem. So now you wrote in particular about a business deal that Don Jr. was involved in. Is starting in 2012, and I think you're right that it gives you an interesting insight into how Don Jr. rolls, as you guys mentioned in the article. And so let's talk about that deal. It was in South Carolina. What was it about?
Yeah, so let me just back up a little bit. So Don Jr. Around 2010 started another business in South Carolina called Titan Atlas Manufacturing. And their goal was to send hundreds of thousands of low-income housing kits around the world. And I actually talked to someone who met in Don Jr.'s office with him, and Don Jr. peered out his 26th floor window and said, my dad's made his mark building these glorious skyscrapers. I want to make my mark a different way. I want to build housing for the poor. And this guy was like pretty moved by that. But the truth is this company in North Charleston really only had one fundamental customer, and that was the mayor of North Charleston, Keith Summy. Otherwise, it left a trail of lawsuits, millions of dollars in debt, hurt a lot of people. And so despite this, in 2012, the biggest building in North Charleston, the former Naval Hospital, was up for sale by the federal government. And mysteriously, both Keith Summy and the city of North Charleston and Donald Trump Jr., a new company he formed called Shakora Gardens LLC, both bid on this building. The city won, but here's the strange part, is that Don Jr. and his partners acted like they won. Don Jr. came to town, as we talk about in our story. He met with a landscape architect, and they developed this vision which showed this naval hospital was going to be surrounded by essentially like Central Park. There was going to be a great lawn. There was going to be, a Japanese garden, playgrounds. And Don Jr. also showed up at a city council meeting, and he and his partners said, we're going to have the Cleveland Clinic. The Cleveland Clinic is going to be our anchor tenant in this great new development, which is going to revitalize this poor area of North Charleston. And a Trump hotel, a 5-star Trump hotel, will also come in, and this will pay, families of patients, of wealthy patients will come here, and other people, and it's going to be this incredible thing for Charleston. So that was like the promise of the thing.
So let me get this straight. A guy named Donald Trump said he was going to do great in business, but instead bankrupted himself. And then in another venture, he lost but pretended he won. I wonder where he got all that from. Okay, so now already it's super interesting. So he loses the bid, he comes in pretending that he won. It's also kind of a Costanza move. Then what happens next? Does he mysteriously win just because he pretended it?
So the city agrees to sell this building, which they just bought, back to the people who lost the auction, or to the people who lost the auction. And despite these promises of like private development, in fact, what we learned through FOIAs and other sources is that they had lined up the county of Charleston, who came in and signed a 25-year lease, which what I was told is that Don Jr. loved it because the banks loved it, because these guys were having trouble getting bank loans. But once they had a county with a great bond rate come in, they were able to basically take out $20 million in loans, and which kind of disappeared in self-dealing companies and in other ways. But the real disturbing part is that person after person, like over a half dozen sources that we talked to, including people who worked for Don Jr.'s company, told us that they basically wrecked the building, that there was this like inexplicable focus on demolishing parts of the building where there were no tenants and then stripping it for copper and other materials. And when I first heard this, I was like, yeah, come on. And I talked to Don Jr.'s main partner there, a guy who's known for 2 decades, who's like a hunting friend. And he said, well, we were just recycling, but it was more than that. I mean, what I was told was that this fundamentally undermined the safety and the integrity of the building, and it's ultimately why it's was left in total ruins.
Yeah, so there's so many different like playbooks for scams rolled up all into this one business enterprise. So I want to try to break it down. When we get to the judge who gave him the money, that's the part that's the most infuriating, because how are they going to get paid off this thing is the thing I kept wondering as I'm reading your story. But it seems like there's a little bit of a private equity type scam here, because sometimes private equity will get a deal and then they'll just take the loan and put it in their pocket and then let the business rot. And so I'm curious about that part of it.
That's a really interesting point. I want to talk about the judge, but let's also talk about another way that they were able to enrich themselves through a friend of Donald Trump Sr. who came in and kind of helped rescue them after that. If you think that's a good point of conversation. But okay, so Joe Dawson was the longtime county attorney in Charleston County, kind of a confidant, a longtime ally of Tim Scott, who's the senator from South Carolina. And as they were basically, stripping this building of copper and having all kinds of other problems, they had a deadline. The deadline was January 1st, 2015. And what we discovered in our investigation is that Joe Dawson drafted a lease amendment. And what that amendment said was that we're gonna strike that date entirely. Now, changing a date, I mean, this happens all the time, construction experts told me, but Joe Dawson just struck the date entirely. And people who are, construction law experts told me, multiple people said that this really defied any kind of above board explanation, because he represents the county, and yet he did something which completely undermined the county's position. And so once the county of Charleston declares, first of all, the county of Charleston cancels the lease because the building is, they say, unsafe, which it seemed clearly it was unsafe. And they, then Chicora Gardens, Trump Jr.'s company, declares bankruptcy. The whole thing basically unravels because the federal judge says, okay, well, you're actually County of Charleston responsible for this lease because of this lease amendment, which this guy Joe Dawson wrote. So Dawson is primarily responsible for taxpayers having to foot the bill for $33 billion. Because otherwise, it seems to us and multiple other legal experts who we spoke to that the judge wouldn't have made that ruling, because he cited it, specifically in his.
Hold up, Joe. So
sure.
So
it's complicated. So yeah,
no, it's okay. So they get the loan for $20 million. Now, in a normal business dealing, what they would do is they would then improve the building, make it into a great building and start renting it out, right? And then they would make enough money that they would pay back the $20 million loan and they would make a profit. That's normal. That's normal business.
Sure.
So in this case, they take the $20 million and they strip the building of its copper. I mean, already we're off to a bizarre start in a sense. And I don't know that that's the technical start of the first things that they did, but at some point they clearly give up and start stripping the building, right? But then the question is, what the hell are they getting $33 million for? Like, you go bankrupt. See, that's the thing, man, that's so frustrating to everybody. You go bankrupt, if you're a normal person, you're screwed. And you get bankrupt over a medical bill, etc.
The guy who negotiated that payment was Joe Dawson, who in the final days of the Trump administration was named as a federal judge and is now, has a lifetime appointment as a federal judge. So, I mean, that's just what happened. Whether there was a quid pro quo or not, I wasn't part of those conversations. I can only report, what happened. And also that during his confirmation hearings, Mr. Dawson was not, Judge Dawson was not, forthcoming about, this mistake. that he had made. People make mistakes, but he kind of hid behind it in written answers to Dianne Feinstein. He said, well, this is really, attorney-client privilege material. I can't get into it. But I think he should have, at a minimum, acknowledged what happened.
Okay, so this federal judge is now deciding cases. To me, my opinion is he's obviously a crook. So let's talk about the 33 million though, because the people at home might be going, yeah, but how did they get the goddamn money, right? So is it because that this Joe Dawson guy took out the time factor for when they had to deliver? Then when it goes to an actual judge, the judge says, well, the leasing contract says that you guys owe them money for the government owes them money for the lease in perpetuity, basically. They never have to deliver. And so you guys owe them $33 million. Is that, and then?
I mean, that's why we did the story, and I did the story because as I spoke to people, I found that, people were hurt here. People were never paid, workers were exposed to asbestos, there's major health consequences. And, this project that was supposed to help people who are, in need ended up taking away money from those things. But, one of the things that we discovered was that the security director for Donald Trump Jr.'s company was actually sending text messages saying, hey, this is troubling. I'm seeing copper stripping here. I'm telling you about this. He was a whistleblower. But, because I think Donald Trump Jr. and his partners had ingratiated themselves so much to, in the kind of political culture of Charleston County, with some people, not everyone, there were people who were skeptical too. I think that that this whistleblower was trying to, call out this project and put a stop to it. Like his claims never even came up in this, in this case, where these guys got $33 million. So I mean, I think there's a lot of. I think the main point here is that there's a lot of questions that still I think need to be answered. I mean, I spoke to former bid rigging prosecutors and experts, and they said there's quite a string to pull on here. Why were these people both still bidding on this? How did then it end up, going to one party, then being sold, and then becoming a government project, which seems, perhaps not the most sincere effort at performing, a needed construction project. Yeah. So I think that there's something further to investigate here.
Yeah.
As well as to read our great investigation, New Republic, which I hope people will do.
Yeah, everybody read the New Republic piece. We'll put the link down below. But look, I don't think it's complicated. I think they're all crooks, and I think they're going to get away with it because there's no rule of law if you're a right winger in America, especially if your name is Trump. There's no way they're ever going to get prosecuted, and it's the crooks in the government that did it. They basically, you can run this scam with anyone who's politically connected. Go buy a building, have the government lease out a giant thing so they owe you $33 million, and then go bankrupt instantly and tell the government, give me the goddamn $33 million. And as long as you had a crook inside the government who structured the contract in that way, you'll get your money. And so,
yeah, I mean, it's not my place to label, people crooks or not. But what I can point out, you're right, yeah. But I mean, I think what I would point out is that Donald Trump Sr. was actually, I mean, he was involved in Donald Trump Jr.'s efforts in Charleston. We discovered this. First of all, Don Jr. turned to a longtime confidant of his dad's, Pam Newman, who's been subpoenaed as part of the Manhattan District Attorney's ongoing investigation. And she helped make an argument, and Aon helped make an argument to undo a $1.3 million security deposit, which was supposed to protect taxpayers there. That money then went to Don Jr.'s company. We also discovered, do you remember the famous Michael Cohen recording of talking about hush money payments that was released in 2018? Well, I was fascinated by this because in the beginning of that recording, Donald Trump, the candidate, is talking about the Charleston thing, and he's saying, he's calling this some claim and saying he wants to go away. Well, it turned out he was talking to this same Pam Newman. Michael Cohen, confirmed to our investigation that this was the case. Yeah. He was talking to this same Pam Newman. And what he wanted Pam Newman to do was to make a $4.5 million claim about a leaking roof of a building that Don Jr. owned in North Charleston to go away. Because Don Jr. refused to fix it. So we're seeing, Don Sr.'s, longtime confidants showing up in this story, and we're seeing, people who are subpoenaed in the Manhattan District Attorney's investigation. So it's really, it's been an interesting story to unravel, and I think there's more to unravel, as I said, and that's it's a very, it's quite a tale, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting story, and it's an interesting story of how crooks run their scams and how they get away with it. It's not Joe's words, it's my words. They're all crooks, and they're gonna get away with it. No one's ever gonna do anything about it. They stole your money down in South Carolina, and you let them, and you're probably ecstatic about it. Oh, my money got stolen by Donald Trump Jr. Yes, I'll vote for his dad again. That's how this story ends. Okay, but that's my opinion. All right, Joe Rubin, great investigative reporter. Check out his piece. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.